Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Thumbs up. Good. Okay.
Great.
Welcome to our webinar. Today, we are going to talk about the grant opportunities that the City of Elk Grove has for the Community Service Grant, the Community Development Block Grant, and the Event Sponsorship Grant. For just a little housekeeping, by default, all attendees are on mute and your cameras are disabled. So that allows us to have a secure Zoom. We are recording this, so you'll be able to see later. And we'll be able to unmute you at the end if you have questions that you would like to ask, but this gives us the opportunity to record and not have any Zoom bombing. If you do have questions during the webinar, I ask that you please enter them into the Q&A section. So you can find that either at the top or at the bottom of your screen, depending on how your Zoom is set up. There's a Q&A and it has little 2 dialog boxes that you can click on and you can enter in your question. I will most likely be holding most of the questions until the end, just so we can get through the information. I will likely answer some of them as we go along, and then any that we do not answer during the webinar, we will answer at the end. And again, we'll offer the opportunity for those who want to unmute their phone or who are calling in to unmute and be able to ask those questions. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Hang on. Okay. So I want to just take a second to introduce myself. My name is Alicia Tutt, and I am the Housing and Grant Specialist with the City of Elk Grove. I work directly with grantees of the Community Development Grant Block, as well as the Community Service Grant. In the past, I've helped a little bit closer with the event services, but I help with the application process for all of our grant programs. So I'm pretty familiar with most of you if you're returning, and you should have heard my voice or seen emails from me, but I work directly with our grantees to help them through the application process as well as the entire program year. I also want my staff colleague to introduce herself, Jody, who's on the event side.
Hi, I'm Jody. I've worked with some of you, if not all of you, in the past as well. I've been doing the event sponsorship grant program for a while, although last year Alicia stepped in to help out, but I'm back in the loop, which is great. I'll be doing your contracts, helping you with marketing, helping you with anything from the public affairs division and the city manager side that we can when it applies to any events that you might be hosting in Elk Grove if you're applying for the event sponsorship grant. So I'm here too to answer all the questions, but I'm going to let Alicia take it away.
Thanks, Jody. And Jody's going to jump in and help with some of the slides on the event sponsorship stuff as well. So as I mentioned, if you have a question, please enter it into the Q&A section. We are not monitoring the chat box. So all of your questions should go in the Q&A or any comments that you have. If you think of something after this, Jody and I are available for phone calls, for Zoom meetings, for emails, whatever you need. We are available to help you to get through this application process. So let's go ahead and get started. We have 3 funding opportunities with the city. They are the Community Service Grant, which is we label the CSG, the Community Development Block Grant, which is CDBG, and the Event Sponsorship Grant, which is ESG. All 3 grants that we have open right now are for activities or events that will occur between July 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 2022. We start our process early. It's January, but we're starting it early because we have to get through reading all of the applications, going through our budgeting process. All of our funding opportunities have to go through City Council. The CDBG funds have very strict public hearing comment periods and timelines that we have to adhere to for HUD. So we start early so that we're able to get agreements in place and you're able to start your programming July 1st. I feel like, as probably many of you, that we're just on this roller coaster of funding that we just got the other ones in place and started. And if you're CSG or CDBG, we've also had some additional COVID funding. And so it's just right now it's a never ending cycle of applications and agreements, but we're just moving forward. All right, so I'm going to go through the different grant types and some basic information on all of them. And then we'll go through the application process and some of the questions and grant policies. So first, the community service grant, just some basic information. These funds are awarded annually by the City Council. They come from general funds. They're for activities that benefit Elk Grove residents. We're not funding activities that benefit residents outside of Elk Grove. And I'll talk a little bit about how you separate that out if you have a program that does that. But it's really to benefit Elk Grove residents. It's a flexible funding source. We have the ability to provide funding for ongoing program costs, such as your personnel or your supplies, for some minor equipment purchases if you need computers or things like that to help run your program, as well as we have funding for capital improvements to facilities. The maximum award under the CSG is $100,000. With that said, not very many grantees request that high level of amount, and not many are awarded that high level of amount, but that is the maximum that you can request under that grant. This is for programmatic or programs and activities, not for fundraising or one-time events. Those are going to be under your event sponsorship grant, which we'll get to a little bit later. But just note that, and it says that in the application as well, just to trigger it. If you're in the wrong application, you'll be able to find that. But it's really for the activities and programs only. And ideally, our funds that we allocate should expand the capacity of your organization and your program and not replace another funding source. I say this also with a caveat that we also know we're in the world of COVID right now, and a lot of other funding sources are have changed because of the pandemic. And so we have some questions built into the application to help give us a better idea of that. But in general, we're looking to expand capacity and expand programs. But given the current situation, we know that this might look a little bit different this year. For the community development block grant, the city is an entitlement grant under the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, so HUD. We receive funds annually directly to us that are passed through to nonprofits and government entities. Some of our funding that we receive is passed through, and some of it is for admin and capital improvement projects. So for our grantees, again, it's for ongoing program costs, a lot of staffing and personnel and supplies, as well as capital improvements to facilities. Say you're improving your facility for a ADA accessibility, or roof improvements or things like that. Those are things that can fall under CDBG. The caveat with CDBG is that there are several goals that your program has to fall under, and who you serve is pretty specific. So the goals of the CDBG program are to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing, provide suitable living environments, or expand economic opportunities. So your program has to fall within one of those, as well as you have to primarily benefit low-income households to be eligible for CDBG. So that means 51% or more of those that you serve have to be low income. And we do require documentation showing that. So we request demographic information as well as financial income information of all of your participants. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But to be considered low income, according to HUD, a one-person household is $48,350 annually, and a four-person household is $69,050 annually. I have these numbers up to an 8-person household. So if you would like if you serve, your household sizes are a little bit different, or if you want to know what those rates are, please just email me and I can send you that information so you can look at this. The income levels chart, it changes annually. These are the 2021 numbers. HUD typically updates those around April and sends those out, but these are the numbers that we currently have to work with. Jody, you want to jump in?
Sure. So when we're talking about the event sponsorship grant basic information, it's the same thing. These are awarded annually by the city council. It does come from the general fund. And what we're doing is providing assistance to Elk Grove based nonprofit organizations. So if you want to host a special event, whether that's virtual or in person, as we all know, we've had to pivot this past year and change the format of a lot of our events, but it does need to benefit the Elk Grove community. So again, it can't be for a benefit of anywhere outside of Elk Grove. And the event actually has to take place in Elk Grove as well. It can't be organized around political or religious purposes. And if it has a fundraising component, it's eligible if all net proceeds will be provided to a nonprofit that serves primarily Elk Grove residents. And the way that we have our funding set up is you can ask for many different things within the grant. You can ask for direct funding of cash. You can ask for city facility use, which includes our District 56, our brand new property at Bighorn and Civic Center Drive, or the Old Town Plaza, or let's say you want to do something in front of City Hall. You can ask for city facility use, and then in-kind services, which would refer to things like public works, closing of roads, police for traffic control, and marketing. So those are the things that we fund through the ESG grant.
Great. And so our estimated budget for 21-22, estimated is definitely highlighted there, since we don't know what happens from one month to the next in our current pandemic. But the CSG is approximately 390,000, and the final amount is determined during the city budget process. So we base our allocation recommendations on that amount, and then things probably or may get changed during the council budget process and approval. Our CDBG, we are estimating that based on what our current funding level is. And so currently we're receiving around 923,000. 15% of that goes towards public services, which is what the majority of our applicants apply for are your public services, social service programs. So 15% of that 923,000 is what we're allowed to allocate towards that. Then we have another 646 plus thousand that goes towards our capital projects. The majority of those go to our public works projects, which in the past have funded ADA accessible ramp improvements around the city. But we do have grantees and nonprofits that apply for funding in that case or under capital projects. So again, those are some building improvements and things like that. So there is funding available for grantees in that line item. And then our administrative percentage of that, which is approximately, again, 15%, goes to cover grant administration staffing costs and some of our fair housing activities that we do through CDBG. We also may have some additional funding for capital projects. If we have funds that were not previously used from prior years, we may have additional funding that we're able to allocate in terms of leftover CDBG funds. So those numbers kind of are fluid based on that and what is spent in our current program year. Our final amount that we're awarded by HUD is not determined until later in the year. Sometimes that gets pushed out really far, just depending on how the federal budget process is going. But that's there. I also want to note we have received a few rounds of COVID funding this year. I don't know if we'll, if there will be any additional funds that come through CDBG in terms of that. But those numbers are not included in this amount. This is just our regular CDBG entitlement grant. Jody?
Yeah, the funding for the event sponsorship grants, that's based on what we currently funded this fiscal year. And we know a lot of things have changed. You'll see that the in-kind facility use has gone up a lot with the addition of District 56 being built. When anyone uses that, it is a cost to the city. It does come out of our event sponsorship grant fund. So we do set aside money to then repay ourselves, I guess you would say. It just goes into the funding over at District 56 because that is a Laguna Ridge project. So funded by taxpayers too. So a lot of the in-kind and facility use have gone up this past year. And again, like Alicia said, these are all approximate. It depends on how many applications we get. Once the internal panelists review it, things could go up and down, but this is based on what we currently had for this fiscal year.
So some general information on the applications. We have 2 applications. The CSG and CDBG application is a combined application. So it's one link that you'll use to apply for either or both of those funds. And then the event sponsorship grant is a separate link. Applicants can apply for 1, 2, or 3 of those. They can provide, submit as many applications as you would like. There's no limit. We just ask that for each event, you're submitting a separate event application, and for each program, you're submitting a separate, or activity, you're submitting a separate CSG CDBG application. So we don't want you to submit one application for your entire organization to cover an event as well as 2 different social service programs. You want you to submit separate ones, and make sure that when you're titling them that you're clear on what the program is, especially if you're submitting more than one. It gives us as reviewers the quick, easy access when we look in Zoom Grant to find the specific grant that we're looking for. So you want to make sure that your title, your application title, represents the program or the event, and not your agency name, which will be in there somewhere as well. The links to the applications are available at our city website at the link on here. You all should hopefully have received the email as well, which is most likely how you learned about this webinar. But if you have a hard time finding the links or need any information, please send me an email or Jody and we can help direct you to find those. Eligible organizations, nonprofits that are corporations, associations, agencies, or faith-based organizations with a nonprofit status under the IRS are eligible to apply. You have to be in good standing with the IRS. We also ask that you're in good standing with Secretary of State and the Registry of Charitable Trusts, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But we also allow government agencies that are independent of the City of Elk Grove's government to apply for funding. So Elk Grove Unified has applied for funding, CSD is eligible. And then city departments under the CDBG program, as I mentioned, the capital improvement projects, they also apply for some of our funding, and they submit an application as well for that. I do want to let you know that all of the information that you submit, so applications and all the supporting materials, are subject to disclosure via the Public Records Act. So any sensitive information that you have on any of your documents, especially when you get into the budget section or uploading things like bank account numbers or client names, should not be included in your application. You should redact those before you submit. If we do get a public records request, we do have some ability to redact some information, but we want to make sure that you're doing that on your end. If somebody does request anything, they will be given a read access to applications. So just please note that all of this is subject to Public Records Act. So I'm going to take just a quick little break here and run a poll. So as in the advertising, I guess I forgot to say this at the beginning. This is a technical assistance webinar, but it's also a public meeting and helps us get some input from you guys, participants, in terms of your focus and what you think we should focus on as the city in terms of our programming, especially for CSG and CDBG and what we're spending our funds on and funding programs wise. So I have a few poll questions that I'm going to sprinkle throughout this, one to break it up from listening to me talk and to get your input. So let's see, our first poll is really talking about community needs in the community. And so there are several of the questions that I'd like you to go through. There's about 5. If you can go through and just rank your importance, what you feel the importance is, critical, high, medium, or low. These responses are all anonymous. So go ahead and type in your answers or click your answers and then submit. And then once you're done, we'll share the results with the rest of the group. Okay, we'll give you about another 20 or 30 seconds to finish it if you haven't already. All right. So just to give you a little recap, the questions that we were looking for communities are looking in the areas of affordable housing, and our homeless service programs, social services, accessibility improvements, and construction upgrading to public facilities. So we appreciate the feedback that you're giving us. This really helps us plan and implement, and I'll talk a little bit more about in our CDBG, our action plan and our consolidated plan that we went through the process last year. This is all information that we tie into to that and to help guide us in the decisions that we make in terms of funding. Okay. All right, so our next slide really just talks about the application deadlines. We have 2 separate deadlines for the CSG, CDBG program, as well as the ESG. The applications for community service and community development block grant are due February 16th, and the events are due February 26th. We give a little bit extra time. One, for those organizations that are filling out both types of events, we want to make sure that you have ability to not get those 2 deadlines mixed up and finish one application before you're submitting the other, as well as it gives us an opportunity for those that are submitted under the community service grant, if they're more events looking that we see that should apply under the other program, we're able to flag that and give you the opportunity to apply under that before those close. Both of our applications close at 11:59 p.m. It's through the Zoom grants process. It's an electronic application, so it doesn't, it's out of our control. It's closed to set at that, or set to closed at that time. So you're not rushing and having to drive your applications and get them to the City Hall by 5 p.m., but it closes. And once it's closed, it's closed. So just please be aware of that. Hopefully nobody is up at 11:58 hitting the submit button, and that you have a time to get that in. All right, so here's some general information about CSG and CDBG. For CSG and CDBG, the types of activities that are eligible to apply under this grant are services for low-income households, youth, seniors, persons with disabilities, persons experiencing homelessness, persons with mental health, illness, veterans, foster youth, etc. I highlighted these populations because these are the populations that were brought out in the consolidated planning process that we did last year as the community's highest needs populations based on all of the public outreach that we did. So those are, I highlighted here, but it's not inclusive. This is an incomplete list, definitely. Other eligible activities are food assistance programs, job training, education, recreation and sports programs if they're serving low income populations, public safety and crime prevention, housing assistance programs, improvements to existing facilities, or acquisition and purchase of new facilities. If there is something that you're considering applying for that doesn't fall on this list, that you're not quite sure if you think it would fit, you're welcome to email me or set up a call with me or Sarah Bontrager, who's the Housing and Grants Manager. We can talk about it and really help guide you to determine if it's an eligible project or not, if something's a little unclear or you're not quite sure. So somebody asked this question in the Q&A, so here's a great slide for that. How do you know if you should apply for a community service grant or community development block grant or both? Most organizations should apply for CSG. It is the least rigorous of the applications for reporting purposes. It's our general fund. We have the most flexibility in terms of that funding. So we recommend that almost everyone applies under this category unless you know for sure that your program falls specifically under CDBG. When you're applying and submitting the application, there is a question. The very first question asks you which funding source you're applying for. You can select CSG or CDBG, or you can select both. It will not hurt you if you apply for both and we determine that you're not eligible for CDBG, or we determine that your program is best for CDBG and we won't use CSG funds for that. It doesn't hurt you to select both. So if you're not sure, I would click the both button. And then as we talk about the questions a little bit later, you'll see there's some questions that are specific to CDBG. If you get to that point of the application and you cannot answer those questions, then you can go back up and select CSG, knowing that you probably don't fall under CDBG, but it doesn't hurt you. For CDBG, knowing that you will have to collect data on the number of low-income participants and people you are serving. During your application, you have to be able to realistically estimate this, but if you're awarded funding, you do have to collect information from them in terms of demographic information as well as financial information. So if you're serving youth, you're going to have to be able to get that information from their parents. And if that's something that isn't feasible or you aren't quite sure how to do it, we're happy to talk you through some different ideas. But if you don't think that you can do that, then you're not going to be able to be eligible for CDBG because those are requirements in terms of reporting. Applying for both, again, will not hurt your chances of getting a grant. It gives us the ability as city staff to help determine which is the best funding source for you. So some budget ideas in terms of submitting your application and what to put in terms of your request. Again, these are incomplete lists, but here's a few ideas for eligible costs: personnel, staff, so salary and benefits, office facility lease and utility costs. This one is a little tricky if your program serves more than just Elk Grove residents. You need to be able to either show that it's a dedicated cost to just the Elk Grove programming, or this is something that might fall under indirect costs, which I'll talk about in a second. Materials and supplies, communication, we can, in some cases, reimburse phones and internet if it's tied specifically to the program. Local travel tied to the program, we are unable to reimburse any national travel. So just know that it has to be local and it has to be tied to your Elk Grove programming and any contractual services. So if you hire out financial, IT, janitorial services, those kind of things are eligible. CDBG has an indirect cost allocation rate of no more than 10% of direct costs. So if you're requesting $1,000 for personnel costs, you can request an additional 10%, so $100 in indirect costs that will automatically as be reimbursed in part of that. So you do not need documentation for your indirect costs. So we encourage you to include an indirect cost on your budget if you're requesting direct costs like personnel. If you're requesting funding for to provide supplies to your program participants, that's not a direct cost. So we cannot do an indirect on that amount. But if it's a direct cost to your organization, we encourage you to include your indirect cost for 10%. If there's a few cases, if you have an indirect cost allocation approved by the federal government or by HUD, that you can request higher amounts, but that's a pretty rare occurrence. But if your agency has that, you can include that. Some of the ineligible costs would be any programs or services that promote religion, political activities, marketing incentives, or fundraising under the CSG and CDBG programs. So no grant writing, things like that. Anything, a payment of a debt or expense that incurred prior to July 1st, 2021. Again, these funds are for use July 1st, 2021, moving forward till June 30th, 2022. We're unable to reimburse entertainment furnishings or personal property, and again, costs that are not directly related to providing services to Elk Grove residents. Your indirect cost, just as a heads up, it really helps to cover some of those administrative overhead costs that you can't tie directly to your program, like your office space, your workspace, office supplies, like those pens, like you use 2 pens out of a box of 100, things like that. It's really to help cover those costs that you don't have a direct cost to. So one question that came up about Elk Grove residents is what or when is one considered an Elk Grove resident? It's somebody who lives within the city jurisdiction. So not necessarily just our zip codes, since some of our zip codes go into Sacramento. So they have to live within the city lines. If you have questions about an area, whether or not it's part of the city of Elk Grove, you can give me a call and I can help look it up on our parcel viewer map. You can usually also see the city lines on Google, but if you need help being able to find that. For CDBG, you will be requesting their residential information that you keep on file. So you're going to need to make sure that they are a resident. This comes into question a lot for programs that work with the school district, because not all students in our school district and not all schools in our school district are within the city limits. So we will work with you to help determine the schools that are within our school district if you have, or within our city limits, if you have questions on that. And again, if you have questions before you submit your application, please email me and we can talk about it more. So documentation and accounting for the CSG CDBG grant. There's a lot of flexibility in the costs the city can cover, but we require documentation for all of it. All costs need to be clearly related to the activity that the city is funding, and acceptable documentation includes payroll summaries, invoices, receipts, mileage logs. All of those things are going to be needed to be submitted with your reimbursement request. It is a little tricky, probably your first few times submitting. I will work with you to go back and forth to make sure we have the appropriate documentation. Just know that that's common, and I work with all grantees, and there's a lot of back and forth generally in your first couple ones until you get an idea of what we're looking for. But we do require pretty specific information, receipts that show the date, that show the expense and explain to what it is. payroll summaries, time cards of personnel, if that's what you're asking for reimbursement on, things like that. So we want you to keep this in mind as you're thinking about your budget request and really asking for categories that you know you're going to be able to document, you know you're going to be able to collect that information. If your program is serving non-Elk Grove residents as well, you're going to need to have acceptable accounting methods to allocate or separate out your costs. We're going to want to know if you serve 50 people, 25 are Elk Grove residents and 25 are non-Elk Grove residents. We're going to be able to need documentation showing the expenses that are tied to that 25 or 25 personnel people served. And we won't be reimbursing you a full percentage if 100% if half of your population is non-Elk Grove. So we want to make sure that you're building your budget specific to those Elk Grove residents that are served. So with that, I'm going to take a little break since that was a lot of info and run a new poll. The next one is going to go into some of our questions later, but we really want to know the impacts that the COVID-19 is having in our community. We know some of it, and we're definitely talking to our nonprofits a lot, but we want to get your opinion in terms of the population served by your organization, of what who you serve, and if you're a resident and you're not representing an organization, I would ask you to click that at the bottom, identifying that. But then based on your experience, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the population served by your organization? Or if you're a resident not representing an organization, how has the pandemic affected you and your Elk Grove community? So I'll give you a couple minutes to answer that question. So question regarding number 2, we're really looking to see the population that your organization serves, but if you are a resident and not representing an organization, you're going to answer for yourself and your community members that you're aware of or your family and friends. Okay, I'll give you another about 20 seconds. Great. So it looks like the majority of those on the call are serving low-income individuals or households, but we do have a pretty high population of senior, those that are serving senior populations. And as not not shocking would be the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic are definitely having on our community or across the board in a lot of different areas. So thank you for that. Okay. All right, our next slide. In general, if you're not going to provide services, increase services, or help more people, we ask that you explain why your current funds are insufficient. And I know this year that's going to come up a lot more than it has in previous years because of the pandemic and because of fundraisers being canceled and just the situation that a lot of people are in. So we've added some additional questions that I'll highlight a little bit later that you can enter in that information, but make sure that you're including in your application why your current funding or funding that you may have had in the past is insufficient to provide services that have been provided in the past. If you're expanding programs, then that's clear, but we want to make sure that if you're asking for programming that you've done in the past that is not being increased. Again, if you serve non-Elk Grove residents, we're going to ask you to find the percentage of time spent on the Elk Grove participants and request no more than that percentage for any one budget line item. So if it's an existing program that you're able to look at your participants and see how many were Elk Grove versus non-Elk Grove, we want you to do that. If it's an estimate, please identify that you're estimating your population based on what you think you're going to serve, but we will ask you to provide that information in your application. So for next, Jody, do you want to take over these ones?
That sounds good. So we're just going to go over some general information for the event sponsorship grants. Are you able to move the slides forward for me, Alicia? Thank you. So there's all different kind of events that you guys can apply for. I mean, whether you're going to hold a concert or a performance, maybe you're going to do a local festival or a fair. We've had a lot of parades in the past, including the Veterans Day Parade, Western Festival Parade, sports tournaments like soccer tournaments, and we've had some other tournaments around town, running events, walk events, any kind of race events that you'd like to hold within the Elk Grove city limits. We've had symposiums and conferences, and now that we have District 56, we have a beautiful facility that you can use to hold your conferences. Breakfast, lunches, dinners, receptions, etc. We know that's an incomplete list. There's many different kind of events that you could be holding here in Elk Grove, and we're open to hear, what you are going to be bringing to the city that will get people out and about and come to your events. We've changed something this year. I mean, before we've never had a question on the application that asks you what your type of event is, but we all know with COVID and the state and county guidelines on in-person gatherings of any kind, that this has really thrown a wrench into everyone's plans. And we empathize with you. It's thrown a wrench into the city's plans as well. Not only do I handle the grants, but I'm also the event producer for the city. So I empathize with you. I grieve with you. It has not been an easy time to figure out how to switch your event. We know that a lot of the nonprofits were hurting this year because they weren't able to fulfill their grants and have their events. Some people were able to pivot, the word of 2020, and create some sort of different event, whether it was a drive-through event or a virtual, or even some of the runs. They still did their runs, but they had you sign up and you were trusted to do the run on your own and turn in your time and your paperwork. So this year we've added something new to the application. If you're planning an in-person, if you're planning a virtual, or if you're planning a combination. Now we know we're pretty far out. Things are changing. People are getting vaccinated. We're going to be very, very flexible with you. So whatever you apply for, we can change it later if things change. So do your best to, shoot for the stars for what you want. And you're going to have a place in there where you can explain, and you could say, should anything change, we do want to change to a virtual event, or we hope to change to a virtual event. We'll be very flexible with you. Just know that you do have to comply with all the public health restrictions, and that's imposed by anyone, whether it's the state, the county, or even the city. We fall to the same rules that you do. I've had to run any of the events that I wanted to do by Sacramento County Public Health. prior to doing anything. So if you're not staying within the guidelines, we wouldn't be able to support your event any longer, and we would have to cancel the contract. So just so you know that, but also know, like I said, just notify us. We're going to be very flexible with you. Should you change, let's say you had a run, right? And we had to close streets, we had to have police on site, we had all kinds of things. You change to a virtual run, it will change the nature of your contract, and it will also change the award that you're funded. It doesn't always change the direct cash funding, but if you've asked for cash funding and your budget shows that you're doing an event where you have to pay for meals and things like that, and you change to a virtual event that's just a Zoom meeting and you're no longer having that money going out, we could reevaluate the cash funding and lower it depending on the type of event you're having. We haven't done very much of that. We've been funding nonprofits to the extent that we've been able to in order to support during these times. So just know that we're here for you and we'll do everything we can to help you through it. But we will be reevaluating should your event change from an in-person event to a virtual event. We talked about this before. Again, direct funding is cash, so you can ask for cash. We don't have a limit like Alicia had of 100,000, but just know we've never gone over 15 for anything. Most are very, very small amounts. That way we can fund a lot. I think last year we had over 53 applicants. So we try and spread the wealth and give everyone some cash funding if we're able to and they meet all the criteria. Facility use. We talked about Old Town Plaza. I don't know if any of you have been through Old Town. It's been under construction all year. It's starting to look amazing. They've put in sidewalks and curbs and can't believe what a difference that has made down there. You can go online and check out what it will look like when it's done. It's going to be a beautiful property. I encourage people to hold events there. We want events there and we want to get people going on the east side of town again. So that's something to look at. It's anticipated to be open in April or May, and that's what we're shooting for. And we know weather can always have an effect on that, but keep that in mind if you're going to request the Old Town Plaza. And then again, District 56, there are indoor and outdoor capabilities there. There is a large community center that's indoor, that's beautiful if you're going to be doing a dinner or some sort of sit down or indoor event. And then there's lots of outdoor spaces. There's the Veterans Grove, which is beautiful. You can do a barbecue or some sort of ceremony out there. We have the flags out there. There's the Avenue of the Arts, and it's capable of holding, I think, over 70 different vendors along the line. In the future, there'll be the preserve that's currently being worked on. So there's a lot of ways you could use District 56. So think about, you know, if you're going to be applying for a facility, that those are what you can apply for. In kind, we have police department services, and that's for traffic management and overall event safety only. It's not for security. So if you're having an event and you're serving alcohol, you're going to have to hire your own security. If you are checking IDs or having people at gates check entrance and exits, that's not a function that the police department can serve. They're there just for overall event safety, and if there's road shutdowns, they're there to make sure that traffic can move in and out. Road closures and traffic management, when you apply for that, let's say you're doing a run, we will have public works that can come out, drop off barricades, drop off cones, signage, no parking along the streets, things of that nature. And PD and public works work hand in hand to make sure that those things can happen. We will have a pre-meeting with you prior to your event if you're closing roads and things like that. So you will be in the planning all the way. Waste management, we do offer trash and recycle carts and service through our partners at Republic Service. It's part of our contract with them that we can pass along to nonprofits. So if you're needing garbage and recycling for your event, make sure that you request that. And then marketing and promotion, not always guaranteed, but we do have a lot of arms. We have the city newsletter, which reaches, I think, 58,000 homes. We have an event advertising sign in town that you can pay to be on. We actually have to pay for that as well. We have a robust social media presence. We've got a lot of different marketing arms that we're using, and we're always, you know, wanting to help out our nonprofit partners and make sure that your event is successful.
Great. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the application process and Zoom grants. And I do want to just remind you that I am seeing some questions that come in. I'm going to cover, if I don't cover them as I'm talking, I will cover them at the end. So I won't forget about you. So if you have them, please feel free to put them in there and we will get to them. But talking about the application process and Zoom grants, all of our applications are completed and submitted online through zoomgrants.com. This is not new. We've had it for several years. So if you're a returning applicant, you should hopefully be familiar with the process. Links are available to each of the application on our website, and we are not accepting paper applications. So you don't have to, again, rush copies to the city or submit anything like that. Everything's done online. Applicants must create a Zoom Grants account to apply. One thing that Zoom Grants recommends and that we recommend as well is that your applicant, you use a generic email address and password on the applicant account if multiple people are going to need full access to the application, or if you anticipate a high level of turnover. If you have volunteers who are working on these applications and they rotate in and out, or you have board members that are going to be working on it, or a grants someone that you hire to do grants, maybe using a generic application account will help. That way you have access to that, full access to that application. If that person leaves and you don't have full access to their account, there are ways of getting it, and I can work with you in Zoom Grants to get things transferred. It's just easier. If you have, there are other abilities to have collaborator roles and things like that, and I can help give you that information from Zoom Grants on how to set that up. But just know, if somebody leaves your organization and you don't have their login information, we will have to work with Zoom Grants to get that info to you. The other thing is if you're using the same account to apply year after year, it's helpful because then you have access to all of your past applications and funded awards. And so you can go in and look and copy and paste information from there, or download documents that you've used previously to update and or resubmit. So it gives you a better access to your organization's history. The second, or as we mentioned before, multiple applications for different projects are allowed. If you have any difficulty with this, once you've started one application, if you're trying to start another one, I can help walk you through how to start another one. If you you have to kind of exit out into a different screen and just says start a new application. So if you get stuck on that, please let me know. I'm happy to walk you through of how to find that. But you can start multiple applications in either of the event sponsorship or the CSG CDBG at one time. We want to make sure that you are on the right application. So I have listed the titles here for the applications that should show in Zoom Grants. There is a way to get to the city page that will show you the 2 different application links on Zoom Grants. But you can, my best recommendation is to access them either through the email that I sent you or through the city's website to make sure that you're on the right application. The application saves automatically when you click between questions. You'll see a little saving, like flashing light show up in the middle of your page that says saving as soon as you click out of any one text box or answer. I will note that Zoom Grants has been used significantly lately in the release of a lot of the CARES and COVID funding. So they've had a lot more traffic than they were first intended and built, because everybody's releasing a lot more applications and funding sources across the nation so that they are supporting. I think most of those have passed, so hopefully it's back to normal, but it was running pretty slow for a while, and they are working on the back end trying to build up some of their stuff. So if you notice that it's running slow, or if the saving little blinking flashing continues to flash, it's generally a little glitch. So if you double click to get rid of that little saving box, it might not have saved your information. So being patient and waiting for it to save on its own is important, but you can go back and check and make sure that it's in there before you move on to the next. If their system is overwhelmed with a lot of people on it, I've found the afternoons work better. Just you can do it obviously at night as well, but the afternoons, like after 3, usually works better just because of the East Coast time difference. You must answer every question and upload all required documents, or Zoom Grants will not allow you to submit. When you go to submit, if it doesn't go through at a little bit down from the top of the page, there will be some red text that tells you the questions that need to be submitted or re-answered if that you're missing information, or it might point out something on your summary page like your employer identification number that needs to be entered, but it won't let you submit if you're missing something. So you want to make sure that you go back and check that so that you can submit. They have a refresh page tab on, it's the upper right-hand corner of this screen. It's not quite at the very top, but it's down just a little bit on the right-hand side. And I would recommend that you use that once your documents have been uploaded, or if you're looking to refresh the page rather than your browser's refresh button, just because if you haven't clicked out of a question, it might not save it if you are using your browser refresh page versus the Zoom Grants. It's a pretty user-friendly system, and hopefully those of you that have used it in the past feel that way as well. It's not too complicated to navigate and work around, and there's a lot of different information on it. On the first row of tabs at the top, it shows the general grant information requirements, and it links to email the city and get our information. You can email us separately, but if you want to email us through the Zoom Grant system, you're welcome to do that as well. But you're going to want to click on that tab to show the text. So the general information gives you kind of information on the entire grant. And then later you'll see there's requirements and those, if it doesn't automatically open and show you all of that text, you're going to want to click on the tab to see it and scroll through it and read through all of that. And then you can click again the tab to hide it so that you can see the questions. In entering text, most narrative categories have a text limit of 3,000 characters, which is about 1 page for the longer questions. You don't have to fill up that entire text box. We want you to be descriptive enough that we know what your program or event is, that we can help give us a good idea of what you're requesting funding for, but concise as well. We are reviewing probably 35 applications under each application type. So we have a lot to get through in a short time period before we have to get recommendations to council. So don't write an entire page unless you need to. I believe only plain text is allowed, so we don't need any fancy formatting. It's just text. You can cut and paste into the document. If you want to separate paragraphs with a blank line, just hit the return in between lines and separate it out that way. If you have something that you want that's more super fancy that you want to provide to us, you can upload that as a document in the document section, and I'll tell you where in a second. As we mentioned before, in CSG CDBG, as well as in the event sponsorship grant, you may not see all numbers or all question numbers. So when you're answering that very first question for CSG CDBG about which funding type you are requesting, if you select CSG only, you're not going to see the CDBG specific questions. Those will automatically get filtered out. So if you're looking at your numbers like, okay, I answered questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you might not see all of those numbers, so don't freak out. But it's a branching question, and that's the way it's set up. For the event sponsorship, that is under question 3 for the platform type you're selecting. So if it's virtual or in person, that's going to affect the questions that you're asked. The summary tab in Zoom Grants is fairly self-explanatory. It's your organization's information, your address, your executive director or CEO information, contact info. If you're a previous applicant and you're using the same account as you have used in the past, that's going to most likely pre-populate the majority of it. We want to make sure that you're going in and updating anything that needs to be changed. If your board president has changed and that's the person you have listed, make sure that you update that. Another field that you might need to update that we've had in the past, some returning applicants have had to go in is the employee identification number. Sometimes this shows up as an error when you go to submit your application and it says that your EIN is not submitted. So you're going to go back to your summary tab and make sure that that's entered in. All applicants who are requesting CDBG funds are also required to have a DUNS number. So we want to make sure that you're getting that ahead of time. It usually takes a couple days, 1 to 2 business days to receive that online. It's a fairly quick process, but this is a federal identifying number that identifies your organization to work with the federal government. So make sure that if you do not already have one, if you're requesting CDBG funds, that you go and get that information. The documents tab, this is one that we want you to look at fairly early on when you're applying or open up your application and start applying, because there's information that you're going to need to gather from your organization and make sure that you get it uploaded. Again, the items that are listed as required, unless you upload the document, it will not let you submit your application until it's uploaded. If you do not have a certain document that is required, say your organization operates a little bit differently and you don't have exactly what is required, go ahead and email myself or Jody and we can work with you to determine what you do have that could be used in place or if you're eligible to apply. So again, that's why we want you to check it early to make sure that it's something that your organization has. The system supports many different file extension types. You shouldn't have any problem with that. If you do, please let us know. There are a couple requirements, as I mentioned earlier, about Secretary of State certificate status. This one, there's a link in the documents tab as well as in the application. I try to put it as many places as possible that you can just go to their website and pull off a printout of your organization's status and make it a PDF and upload it as your attachment. You can also order the actual certificate if you want. It takes longer, obviously, than just going to the website, but occasionally the website is down. So just making sure you give yourself time to look at that. And then we also have supporting materials, which is not required, but we have an option for you. If you have something else that you want to attach that supports your application, if you have a brochure or an annual report, or if you're planning an event and you have flyers or any marketing documentation that you want to upload to help put in that category to help us review your application.
Or if you're closing a road, a map would help.
Yep. Yeah. There is I think there is a line in the event it has that you can upload your map if you're requesting, like if you're doing a parade or something like that. Definitely giving us as much information to help support your application as possible. Submitting the application, once you hit the submit button at I think it's again in near the top on the right hand side, Zoom Grants will send you an email confirming your submittal. So whatever email address you use to set up your account, it's going to send an email to that. If you did not receive an email, you likely did not submit your grant. So something may not have worked. So you want to make sure that you're going to go in. And you'll also know that if you try to go into Zoom Grants and you try to edit, it will not let you edit once you've submitted your application. It is locked and closed to you. So you want to make sure that everything that you have is submitted and entered in the way that you want it before you hit that submit button. If it's before the deadline, I do have the ability to open it for you and give you editing access. So if something comes up, if something changes, or you realize that you submitted the wrong document or something that you want to change, you can let me know and I can unlock that for you, but it has to be before the deadline. So please just know that. And then again, the application period closes at 11:59 p.m. on the deadline. So you want to make sure that it's submitted before then, because you will not be able to submit after that time. And we cannot force a submission after that time. So just please note that time. The other thing is I'm able to help walk through a lot of the questions and kind of what it looks like on your end, but we cannot see your application until it's submitted. So I can't go in and look at your answers or help you with documents on that side. I can help you navigate, but I can't actually see anything that you're entering until it's submitted. So just knowing that side. Zoom grants, as I mentioned, it's a pretty user friendly system, but they have many, many ways of helping. There's a help link at the top of the application on every single page that you can click and it'll give you more information. They have Zoom Grants University that is very well done and has a lot of different topics in terms of collaborator roles, or if you're asking somebody to help with your reporting or your financial, you can give them access just to those sections and it'll help you walk through those. So I encourage you to look at that if you have questions. I can also help you send links to collaborator roles and things like that if that's what you're looking for and you can't find it. They do have technical assistance via phone and email. They are very responsive. I will tell you they're in Colorado, so their time is 1 hour before ours. So knowing that, but I email them frequently. As I was setting up the applications, I would email them late at night on one night, and by the next morning, they would have resolved or answered my questions. So they're really good, and they'll help you technical wise. If it's programmatic wise, you're going to want to contact Jody or myself. And we can help navigate some of those questions that you have for them. Like, again, if you're needing help getting access to a program or an account for someone that is no longer with your organization, you can contact them directly, or you can contact me and I can email them on your behalf and help get that information. All right, so check on the time. Okay, gonna run through some quick questions for application questions that are specific. I'm not gonna go through all of them, but just kind of highlight a few that we tend to have questions on. For the CSG CDBG, as I talked about, the question number 1 is really going to talk about the funding type, so which you're applying for. Again, when in doubt, I would apply for both. And then once you get to the CDBG questions, if they don't apply, you can go back up and select CSG only. Your project description or narrative, this is where you're going to describe the specifics of the activity you're proposing for city funding, the who, what, when, where. If it's tied to something bigger that your agency does, you can note that, but we really want to know what specifically you're asking us to fund and what project and what activity. How do you plan to spend funds if you're awarded? What are you going to spend those funds on? So being as specific as possible in this area really helps gives us an idea of what you're requesting, as well as it helps if you're awarded funding. It helps me in building your grant application or your grant agreement, because I'm going to pull that information into your scope of work. We have some new questions in terms of public health orders. How is your activity complying with public health orders? Should they be in effect during July of 2021 moving forward? And what contingency plans do you have, if any, for conducting program virtually or with social distancing in place? We know many of you have already made adjustments this year, so just identifying what you will do differently if the pandemic is still in effect and if health orders are still in place, what you're going to do differently. We do ask about persons versus households served. For question 10, we're asking you to estimate this for July 1st, 2021 to June 30, 2022. We're asking you to include only people who are going to receive services, not all people who could use the service if desired, just how many people you intend to serve with the program that you're requesting funding for. Don't count the same person twice. So if you're a meal service, that you're providing meal service, and somebody's going to receive a meal every week for the entire year, you're only going to count them once. So make sure that there's no duplication in that, whether it's person or household. And then be realistic, because again, these are going to go into your scope of work and your accomplishments goals. And we want to make sure that they're accurate for your agreement, because we're going to hold you to them. The next question's 11. Oh, I didn't update that. At the top, it should say 13, or no, maybe it is 11 through 17 are CDBG only questions. Some of those, the project beneficiaries, we're asking you the income level. So you're going to talk about the low income residents versus non-low income residents. Please make sure that question 13, the numbers served equals numbers served in question 10 as well. And the application points this out. We want to make sure that those two numbers match. This is often an area where we have to go back and ask for clarification, because you put household served or numbers served in question number 10, but then when you come down to this question, they don't match. So please make sure those two totals match. Your proposed goal is question 15. Again, this is your broad in scope, a general statement on your program's activity or purpose. This is what your goal is of what the program is you're requesting funding, not the goal of your organization, but what the activity is. And then same with the objectives and the outcomes. How are you going to measure the activity and know that you're successful in accomplishing it, what you go up or saying that you're going to do? I provided an example here. I'm not going to go through it, but when you go back, I can send out the PowerPoint slides. Here's an example of just how to fill out goals, objectives, outcomes, and those. As I mentioned, we added some new COVID-19 impact questions. We really want to get an idea of how the pandemic has impacted your organization in terms of finances, staffing. Have you increased staffing? Have you lost staffing? Have you lost funding? Have you got new funding? What has been your organization's response to any financial impact that you have? If you haven't been able to host fundraising opportunities, how has your organization responded to that? Have you received funding through other sources? Have you reduced programming? What have you done overall as an organization? Programmatically, what have you seen that has changed? Is your demand increased? Have you changed in how you're delivering program? Are you doing things virtually now? Are you doing less programming? You're serving less? Are you serving more? Please give us an idea of that information as an organization, as well as in terms of the activity that you're requesting funding for. And then we also want to know what federal assistance, if any, you have received related to COVID-19. Has your organization received any CARES funding or the payroll protection program, any of those funding? That comes into play specifically for CDBG, but we need to know across the board for your organization what funding you have received and what uses you've used that funding for. The next questions, we talk about assets. We really want to get a picture of your organization in terms the financial stability. So these are, again, some things that you might need to dig up and get information for ahead of time. So check this out. We're looking for your total assets, your liquid assets, and your restricted assets. If you have anything that's limited to a specific use. And then finally, we want to know about any other grants. The council always likes to see what other funding sources you've applied for to make sure that you're not just looking for city fundings, that you're looking to diversify your funding. What other grants have you applied for in the past 2 years, and kind of the status of those, if you were awarded or not. The budget, there are some common categories of expenditures that are pre-filled that we put, like personnel and program supplies, things like that. These are editable. You can change and add whatever your organization is requesting in terms of funding. We just put them in there as examples for you to see. if you've been funded in the past, maybe look at your agreement to see what levels or what categories you've had in the past. Personnel, we do ask you to show all relevant personnel, even if they're not proposed for city funding. So if you're only requesting personnel funding on one staff member, but you have 3 staff members that are working on this program, we ask that you include that in the personnel line item so that we can see that. And then it shows how much you're asking for city funds. And then we strongly recommend applications requesting more than $5,000 to submit a more detailed budget in the documents tab under supporting materials. Kind of give us more information and a budget narrative that explains. When we review the application, we look at project feasibility, budget reasonableness, agency capacity, impact on the priority needs and priority areas, new or increased service, how you leverage funds as an organization, and what your self-supporting plans are as an organization in the future. We do send follow-up questions to almost every single applicant shortly after we review it. So please, you'll get an email from me saying that there are additional questions for you to answer. It's in Zoom Grants under the Extra tab. We ask that you please review these and get back to us as soon as possible. We do have a short turnaround generally after we review before we have to get our information submitted for the city council. So we want to make sure that we have as much clarification that we need on your application so that we're reviewing it equitably. We also want to make sure that your contact information is up to date in Zoom Grants, since I will send those questions or those emails through the Zoom Grants application versus just through email. It'll show up as my email address, but it will come through there. And then now I'm going to ask you your final poll question for today. This is really looking at the top 3 priority areas that you believe Elk Grove should address within the 21-22 program year. So helping us again guide where we're spending or allocating the funds that we receive for CSG and CDBG. Give you about another 30 seconds to answer. Okay, thank you for answering. Again, it looks like there's support needed across the board, but the highest affordable housing and then other social service, public services. So I appreciate that, that information. Okay, the next is, this is just a timeline of our anticipated timeline for funding. We anticipate taking these preliminary awards to City Council on March 24th. The council meetings the info will be online, but we'll also send it out to applicants. And there's opportunity for public comment during these meetings. And so that information will be shared as well. We encourage you, if you're interested to participate in that meeting, listen in and make public comment if you would like. The final awards will not be done until the council meeting in May.
Right, if we can go over some of the questions on the ESG applications. I think we talked about this a little bit before, but just again to reiterate that we have something new on there this year due to COVID and gathering restrictions, that you will have an opportunity in question 3 to choose if your event is in-person, a virtual, or if you want to try and do a combination. Let's say you're going to go live on Facebook for something, and then you're going to do like a drive-through event. So you have an opportunity here. Like I said, if you are thinking that you're trying to move forward with something later in the year, a full in-person event, go ahead and choose in-person. And then under your descriptions tab, you can also say, should the health order change, you know, we will amend event as needed. And then there's questions 4 through 5. These are branching questions. So if you choose one of these, then it's going to lead you to another question. And so it's going to ask for your plan if you choose in-person or a combination event, that if the public health order is still in effect, what is your contingency plan? So just for an example, I'm planning my events right now, and I'm planning plan A and plan B. So plan A would be my in-person plan, and plan B would be, what do I do if I can't be in person? So just be as specific as you can here. Share what you think you might know. We all know it's very unknown right now. And again, we'll be very flexible with you with whatever plans you have. For your description, you're going to be really specific, because this is what we used in your scope of work. You know, you're going to say it's a lunch for 250 people with a county representative and the mayor speaking. Funding from this lunch will help us provide more programs throughout the year. For questions 10 and 11, for the date and the location, if it's unconfirmed, you can just put an anticipated date and a location, and you can indicate that it'll change. So soon as it changes, you can reach out to us, let us know, and then we're able to make sure that we have all of the information we need for when it comes time for us to create your contract. Type of sponsorship you're requesting in question 13, just remember again that the Old Town Plaza has construction work anticipated through April of this year. We're hoping that by May we're able to use it. And there's an other that you can put under. Let's say you want to have the mayor speak at your event. Just note that there. Or if you're looking for goodies to go in your giveaway bags, let's say it's for a run. I've had people ask me for like 5,000 pencils. So anything else that you can think of that you're requesting for a sponsorship, you can put that in the other category. Again, in-kind services under question 14, we will not provide police as security. You're responsible for coordinating your own security. And we also cannot provide technical support for any kind of Zoom or virtual events. We did have a group ask us if we would host it. And we are not able to host a Zoom through city channels. We're not able to host a Facebook Live through city channels for anyone's event other than our own. So apologize that we're not able to help you in that regard, but I'm sure we can connect you with some folks that maybe might be able to help you. There's been a lot of different platforms out there right now for events that are taking place virtually. I've sat in on a lot of international webinars, and I'm more than happy to share that with you. Our anticipated timeline, again, you know, the application went live on the 15th, and the deadline is the 26th. We do an internal review period with several internal agencies and external agencies, and we take our recommendations to the council in April. The final amounts awarded in May, June, and then again, this is for events that begin after July 1st.
Great. I want to go over just a couple of the quick grant policies. Again, this PowerPoint and the webinar will be posted online, so you'll be able to see these in more detail if you want to get a copy of these afterwards. But just a heads up, awarded applicants will receive one or more grant agreements based on the funding source. They are sent electronically. We are doing DocuSign. We started that before the pandemic, but I think most people have gotten used to electronic signatures and doing things electronically. So we do have the option of a paper copy if you would prefer that to sign. Just let me know. We ask that you read your agreement carefully before signing it, even electronically. Make sure that it is accurate because most edits will require a formal amendment once the agreement has been executed. All grantees are required to hold insurance. That information is in your agreement. If you have a question about that ahead of time, please let us know and we can send you kind of the guidelines of what it shows in the agreement. But the types and amounts can vary based on the activity or event, but we will not sign the agreement until we have the insurance requirements are met. For file retention, for CDBG and CSG, you must retain files for 5 years, and for events, you must retain them for 2 years. All organizations who are applying must be in good standing with both the California Secretary of State and the California Attorney General Registry of Charitable Trusts if required by law to be registered. The links are in the application, several different places for you to be able to check. If you are not required by law, please just let us know so that we can make sure and our city attorneys agree with that. We are unable to send you an agreement to look at or sign until you are in good standing, and we will also check throughout the grant terms before we reimburse funding to you in any case to make sure that your standing is still in good standing. If you are including the city's name and logo in material, one, you need to request permission. So please send us the information that you want to put it in, and we will have our marketing department look at that and give you the correct logo for that material. But we should be included in any material you use identifying any person or entity as being a sponsor, donor, or contributor to. So please send that to Jody or myself and we will review those. In the instances where a grantee receives funding related to the arts, you also are required to display the logo for the Elk Grove Arts Commission, and we'll provide those to you. So if you have questions about any of this, let us know and we can walk through what you need and what you definitely need to include it on. Payment requests are submitted through Zoom grants. You'll get more of this information if you're awarded, but just so you know, it's a system that you'll be using for payment requests and your reporting. Failure to comply with the terms and conditions of the agreement, including those public health orders like Jody mentioned, may result in the city reducing or terminating funding. So all of that will be in agreements for you to look at, but just know that that is the case. Reports are also submitted through Zoom grants. For CSG CDBG, they're quarterly and are mid-year. And then for events, it's a post-event summary report, including a financial summary. Technical assistance and monitoring. Jody and I are available to help grantees throughout the year. So if you have any questions, please let us know at any point. We're here to work with you and help make sure that your event or your program runs smoothly and is successful. So if anything changes, as she said, or if you have any questions or concerns, talk to us, let us know, and see what we can do to work with you on any of those changes. But please just keep in touch with us and let us know ahead of time rather than down the road. We're also available to help navigate through Zoom grants. For CSG CDBG, we do periodically complete monitoring visits, so where we look at financial and program information. So please just note that as well. Questions. This is where, if anyone, I'm going to look through the questions that have been submitted, but if anyone has anything that we didn't cover, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box and we can go through. I know one of the questions was regarding a homeless program. If it's located in Elk Grove, will anyone living in that program be considered a resident, or will you be looking at prior address? We do not look at prior address for those. If they are a homeless individual who is residing in the Elk Grove area, then they are part of that. If they are usually with your programming, they have connections to the Elk Grove community. If you have specific questions, it doesn't tell me who asked that question, but we can talk through that if you want to talk specifically about the population your program serves, and if they're eligible, please email me. Question about, yes, sending out the slides. I can definitely send out the slides to those that registered with their information. If they're anonymous, then I don't have it, but you can email me and I can send them to you. They will also be posted on our website. At this link, we'll put the PowerPoint slides up. Those should be able to go up pretty quickly. And then the webinar will be posted. It needs to go through closed captioning before it can be posted, but as soon as that is done, we will post that as well. But the PowerPoint slides I would anticipate should be up within a day. But you can email me as well and I can send them to you. Are there any other questions? Again, if something comes up that you didn't think of to ask, or as you're going through the application, you can contact myself or Jody directly, and we are happy to assist in any way that we can. Jody, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, great job, Alicia. We're glad that all of you joined us. It seems like this is a good forum for us to have more folks join us and learn about the grant program. Like Alicia said, we're here for you. We really want to help you. We want you to be successful. We want to have in-person events. So go ahead and apply and we'll work through it with you. And you can always rely on any of the expertise we may or may not have to help you get through it.
Great. I don't see any more questions. So I want to thank you all for attending and let us know how we can help. And good luck. Bye, everybody.